Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. Today we are talking about ducks, as we have some ducks migrating through, but we're also going to give some updates about some other things we were talking about, such as the orange snowy owl in Michigan, some of the America's Favorite Warbler bracket. We are moving on to the round of 32, which is exciting. So we have some new matchups, and then we're going to get into all about ducks.
You want to start with the snowy then? Jump right into that?
Yeah. So basically, we had done a video and found information about that orange snowy owl in Michigan. It's a bunch of mainstream stuff trying to say that it was genetic. It didn't really seem genetic at all to us or to, some other birders and people that looked into it. It seemed more like paint or um de-icing fluid from like an airport or fire retardant or something like that. And there was an article that came out yesterday that we saw that had a picture of presumably that same snowy owl with a completely white head, just some orange on the wing, and just very residual orange. So it appears to be that same owl with that dye or paint now much far removed, which totally supports the theory that it was some kind of substance on it and not a genetic mutation.
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier when that came out, and it felt like so many people were on the genetic mutation bandwagon, and it was like we were looking at the evidence provided, essentially just, what the pattern looked like of the color, what the differences were between different photos of the bird, and it just seemed completely illogical that it would be a genetic mutation. And it felt like some sort of vindication to be like, okay, yeah, we knew it all along. We said this. So that was nice, as opposed to, some evidence coming out to the contrary, which would have been surprising anyway. But this really does point to something happened. And we actually put a another video out about this. It was a short. There was another picture that we found of somebody really close to this bird, and the bird looked like it was in a barn, which is weird because why
I
would it
think
be
it
in a barn?
was. Somebody said that's like where it was first seen or something. But the angle of the photo looks like the person could almost reach out and touch it. So I'm like,
Hmm.
why was that? Why were they able to get that close? Like, was the owl sick? I don't know. I feel like there's something we're not knowing about this story. Like some guy was like, I accidentally spray painted an owl and like didn't tell anyone or something. I don't
Somebody
know.
out there
I have
has
no
this
idea.
knowledge and just is not sharing it with the rest of the
It
world.
would be cool if they could get a feather to test it, but it is also really good that it's still surviving and it has like seemingly survived the hardest part of this ordeal being like, very orange. Now it's less orange, and I would think it would be easier for it to survive. I don't know if that substance is toxic or whatever, but it's cool that it's seemingly still going
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think the fact that we know that this is paint now too is eventually
or
going to let,
something.
or something. Yeah, it's some sort of coloration, non-natural
Substance.
coloration.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a substance. And I think eventually knowing that, the story is kind of going to fade away, much
But
like
I
the
don't know.
orange
I
paint
don't think
itself.
that's gonna come out more because we had the huge stories of, oh, it could be genetic. And then I feel like the actual information, like it just doesn't get, it doesn't get the same push. Like news outlets have already done something. I feel like they're not gonna do another thing, be like,
But what
actually,
I'm saying is we can let it go. Like not just us, but everybody, because you won't see new information about it, I wouldn't think.
hopefully not.
So at some point, that's just going to get let go. I don't think it's going to be like the yellow cardinal that we still see everywhere,
Well,
where
that
that
actually
was
is genetic
right.
mutation.
That was an actual genetic mutation. That's what I'm saying. Though, is we won't for years and years and decades see pictures of the snowy owl being like 1 in a million owl still out there somewhere because obviously it wasn't. So that's going to get fact checked the more this information gets out. So. I think we can finally kind of put it to bed, although I'm sure people will keep discussing it as that information trickles to other places. Because I'm sure there are people today that just recently saw the first story that was put out about how some scientists said it was a genetic mutation. That's going to keep trickling down and infiltrating people that haven't heard about it yet. But hopefully, the correct information will at some point become more available to people, and then we can just let it go for good.
Hopefully, still interesting. Like still an interesting story, but much more along the lines of the, you know, rare seagull turns out to be gull covered in curry than one in a
And we'll probably
million.
never know what happened. I don't
I
think
don't,
anybody's going to come
I
out and say,
didn't,
yeah, I spray painted that guy. He was in my barn and boom, got him.
well, I didn't think that it was even still around. So I was surprised when somebody had that picture. I don't know if it's still in Michigan. I don't know if it's somewhere else. Um, but it would be cool if somebody got a feather from it. Somebody left a comment on one of the videos saying there was like a great blue heron that was blue that looked similar, and they did get a feather, and it turned out it fell into like a vat of something, something that dyed it. I don't know, but they were able to get a feather in that case. It would be cool if somebody could, find a feather and
There's a children's book
test
in
it.
here somewhere about an owl that gets painted orange, and then everyone's trying to figure out what it is, but the owl won't tell anyone or keeps telling everyone different stories, and
I
no
don't
one
know.
knows the
Maybe we
truth.
should write it.
Maybe it's an adult book, actually.
I don't know. But anyways, we have the round of 32 for America's favorite warbler. And I have been lamenting the loss of red-faced warbler to yellow-rumped warbler, which I think is a travesty. But anyways, yellow-rumped warbler moved on, and we have some interesting matchups. What do you think the most tight matchup is going to be?
I feel like a lot of them are going to be tight. The one that I'm really interested to see is Kirtland's versus Blackburnian. I think that's the most hard-hitting matchup. So
I
I don't
don't
know
think it's
for
going to be as hard-hitting as you think.
Well, I think that Kirtland's is a pretty enigmatic warbler, and I think a lot of people's life goal for birding is to see Kirtland's warblers. But I also see how excited people get when a Blackburnian warbler is around. I mean, I can just look at the bracket real quick and point out some other ones too, real fast, that I think are going to be close. I was talking to you about this earlier because we literally didn't, we did this not too long ago at all. We went through the bracket and everything, made the video for it for round of 32. But I'm legitimately excited about this stuff. Just looking at the
Brackets are
bracket,
fun.
yeah, looking at the bracket, trying to predict matchups. One other one that I really like now that I have the bracket in front of me, Cerulean Warbler, Yellow-throated Warbler. That one's
Mm.
really exciting. A nice two warblers there. Black-throated Green Canada should be close, I
Mm.
would think. Black and White versus Ovenbird should be close. Tropical Parula Rufous-capped Warbler. The list goes on and on. There's a lot of interesting matchups. Golden Wing Black-throated Blue, Cape May
Kentucky
Hooded.
American Redstart.
What was that?
Kentucky American Redstart.
Yeah, and we don't know which way any of them are going to go for sure. That's why it's so interesting, is because we were very surprised that red-faced warbler got taken down by yellow-rumped
Barely.
warbler.
Just a couple of votes. Not
Just a
even that
couple of
many.
votes, a handful of votes. You could have made the difference. Derek thought about campaigning, and I had to
Doing a
tell him no.
recount.
Well, you thought about getting out there and just, telling everybody to go vote for the red-faced warbler. I think you contemplated voting multiple times too.
No, you can only vote once. I did vote. You voted too,
I
didn't
voted
you?
too, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna vote again. I'm probably gonna be the first vote, first or second vote this time, and I'm gonna look and be like, oh, it's 100% for this bird.
Yeah. But let's move on to our topic of the day, which is ducks, because we've had the ducks moving through. And I kind of broke the ducks down into three different categories. The dabbling ducks, the diving ducks, and the sea ducks. So in the diving or in the dabbling duck category, well, let's start off with kind of, the common ones. We got the mallard, which when we did America's favorite duck bracket, we contemplated if the mallard was just going to clean up because everyone's familiar with it. Who doesn't love a mallard hanging out in a stream? And it actually didn't do that well, I don't think. So, or it didn't do as well as we thought it might.
Well, let's first talk about the timeline here, because that's what makes, I would say, winter and spring and fall too, but I think winter and spring more so are very interesting times of the year for the ducks, at least where we are, because we're right along the Great Lakes. We probably get more ocean type bird, sea duck activity than most other states do, where most states aren't getting a lot of seafaring ducks in their inland lakes. We have Lake Michigan there, so we get more. But during the winter, we get the stuff like the scoters coming through, harlequin ducks, long-tailed ducks, and then scaup by the thousands, goldeneye by the thousands. And then when spring comes, a lot of those ducks are still around. Many have left, but we still have harlequin ducks sometimes, long-tailed ducks sometimes, a lot of scaup everywhere. But then the dabbling ducks and the other birds that are more, marsh species, inland species start to come through as well. So we have this confluence of different duck species right now. So if you're a waterfowl person, March in Wisconsin and the Midwest is the time that you're going to want to go out and looking for all those birds. And you can get very high numbers of ducks, both individuals and species. So I'll always remember going to the marshes near us when we first started birding and just seeing like 10 different duck species.
But it's always there for you,
What?
the mallard.
The mallard. The mallards will be there in their various plumages, both domestic and wild.
Yes. with the little Jerry curl on the back tail feathers.
I remember when we first started birding, actually, we saw mallards down at the local park, and we continued to think that they could be different species because they were so different looking.
Yeah, there was like the hooded merganser that would hang out with them too, and the black duck. So there were some other species mixed in, but yeah,
Yeah,
those
but you get
domestics will
the
mess you up.
manky mallards in particular, the ones that are dark but have the white bib. When you're
Yeah,
just
the
starting and you
Duclair.
don't know anything about different duck species, you see that compared to a regular mallard, and you're like, oh, that probably is something different. But it's just the domesticated version. And mallards mate with almost anything. So you get a lot of different mallard variations with farm ducks and wild ducks and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Mexican ducks and mottled ducks and all that.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are many different ducks out there that look like mallard ducks.
And then you got the American black ducks that hang out with them.
Well, yeah,
Um,
American black duck, mottle duck, Mexican duck, and then female mallard all look very similar. And I think a lot of times people just tell based on the part of the country that you're in.
yeah, the ones that have really come through in forest lately have been like the blue wing teal, the green wing teal, and the shovelers. And I feel like those three always kind of pal around together. You might get some ringneck ducks and
Gadwall,
canvasbacks and redheads mixed
widgeon,
in. Yeah, they all kind
scoff.
of like, belong to that same category. And at least by us feel like they kind of come through at the same time. The main one I feel like we don't really get as far as dabbling ducks is cinnamon teal. Like cinnamon teal just does not normally show up by us.
Yeah, we get one or two every now and again. I remember there was a really nice one that showed up in Madison area a few years ago. That one was showing pretty well. It's a very striking bird for sure. I don't think I've even had a lot of experiences with them outside of the state, actually. I remember the first time we saw one, we chased that thing all over because it would
Cinnamon to try to find it,
show up
yeah.
one place, we would go for it to be gone. It would pop up in another place, counties over, we'd go for it to be gone. And we eventually caught like a 5 second glimpse of it as it was like passing under a bridge because they can be kind of skulky. They like to live in the reeds and the cattails. They're not always out in the open. They're very similar to blue-winged teals in that regard.
Yeah, I feel like they're one of the only ducks that's really like Western heavy. You know what I mean? I feel like we get almost everything except
That and
cinnamon
Barrow's
teals.
goldeneye.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder if there's other ones on this list that are more Western. Of course, things we don't get as much are like the eiders, like spectacled king or common,
It feels like it's been a number of years
dellers,
since we've gotten an eider too. And our first ever video we actually put on the channel was finding a king eider.
and the views were terrible. Like I
Just
think
terrible.
I don't even know if we would have made that video now. We just had the views that we got because it would have been so dissatisfying.
It would be
But
funny if like our thousandth video or something was also finding a king eider, just bring it back full circle.
if it was really close up, that'd be really cool. What's kind of your favorite out of those ducks that we have coming through now? Like, Gadwall, widgeon, green wing teal, blue wing teal, shoveler, wood duck.
Oh, there's a couple we forgot to mention as well. So ruddy duck, one that
Well,
comes through.
they're not really here yet. Have you been seeing a lot? I haven't
I
really
mean, they'll be
seen.
here in winter sometimes. So I've seen ruddy ducks this winter already.
We'll get
But
more in the summer though.
well, more or less, they'll still come through around the same time as the other ducks. And then a big one, wood duck.
I said wood duck.
Oh, did you say
You
wood duck?
missed it. Bufflehead too.
Buffalo, they're kind of here in winter as well, but they'll also be here in spring. But I think that out of the ones mentioned, American Widgeon is probably my favorite. There's just something about that color pattern, that kind of blue bill, greenish head with the white stripe on it. They're a nice looking duck species.
And then I don't think they're really here yet, but pintail. Always a
That's
fan
a good one
favorite, the
too.
northern pintail.
Saw a couple pintails the other day, so
Did you?
it
Where was that at?
that was somewhere in Columbia County with Natty Wags. We were out there and saw. It was Goose Pond. Goose Pond, we
Gotcha.
talked about it last week, but it's this area that's basically a huge, kind of like a flooded field because sometimes it doesn't have much water in it, but this part of the year it's pretty filled up. Thousands and thousands of waterfowl, tundra swans, and we were there recently, so there'll probably be a video out on our trip there soon. But saw every goose species that there is to see in Wisconsin regularly, tons of ducks, lots of cool stuff. And you were there too after we recorded last week's episode, right?
Yeah, there were tons of tundra swans. It was just neat to hear the noises of all the birds there, kind of just um, the culmination of different bird noises. Tons of white-fronted geese. We had to kind of work to pick out a couple Ross's geese and snow geese. A lot of cackling geese out there too.
Shocking amounts of cackling geese. I always think of
Yeah,
cackling geese as difficult to find because, I think you're just usually looking through flocks of Canadas when it's not the optimal time of year, hoping. But when it's the right time of year and you're in a migratory flyway and you see a big flock, you can get a lot of cackling geese.
yeah, they kind of look like little bowling pins, kind of how I think
Absolutely.
of them. Um, But when you're trying to do the checklist for these places, because we were hitting a bunch of like migratory spots, we were looking for the California gull, which was hanging out with a group of ring-billed gulls. That was a, needle in the haystack type deal. Thankfully, anytime I look for a California gull, there's a really good birder named Steve in Wisconsin. I feel like he's always there and he helps pick it out. So it's
He's
just
also
like
the Smith's longspur guy that somehow goes through flocks of Lapland
he
longspurs
does a
every
lot of
year.
good work for the birding community. But
He
yeah,
does.
um, so we were looking for the California gull. Did find the California gull thanks to Steve and another birder who were there to help us pick it out. But then we were going through all these different hotspots, and it's hard to do the checklist for those when you're running from place to place. Because I'm trying to finish the checklist from one. We're already at the other. I'm like, man, did I have green wing teal there, or was that just at this spot? And trying to estimate the totals with those large groups of birds, it can be tough.
Yeah, one of the worst things too is if you've hit several places and then you didn't do checklists because you were in a
Mm.
rush or something, and then later you're trying to retroactively remember what you had, and they're all just blurring together. And you're like, did I see blue wing teal every place that we were? Did I see none? What happened?
Um, are we missing any ducks here? We got mallard, black duck, mottled duck, gadwall, pintail. Should be on the lookout for Eurasian widgeon right now. Green wing teal, blue wing teal, cinnamon teal, shoveler, wood duck, canvasback. I feel like is always one. It always feels good to find a canvasback because I don't see tons of them. There's normally just a couple or one mixed in a group.
One thing that I will say about ducks is that we think of waterfowl and ducks as strictly migratory, but a lot of these birds will be found in places that just have open water that are more north. They're not types of birds that need to be away from the cold all the time. They're birds that just need to be able to find food. So similar to Canada geese, how Canada geese will stick around in areas if they have open water or just open grass and fields. Ducks, if they have open water that has rich resources in terms of food, will stay in an area. So I remember one time a few years ago, I was actually out birding in very sub-zero temperatures. It was one of those polar vortex days, and I was birding around the Madison area. And the Madison area has a lot of open water, partially because it seems like there's springs out there, partially because people now try to keep more water open than they did before with different ways of cycling it through. But in that sub-zero, there was open water and some canvasbacks were there. So these birds do a fair job of handling cold temperatures and don't always need to go anywhere. I remember a couple, I think it was last year, we actually had canvasback on the first of year as well.
Yeah,
So
we can get some good ducks on the first, depending on what the conditions are.
yeah, so these ducks are not just strictly we need to get out of here when it's cold. They can survive, which is very impressive. But that's why sometimes duck migration, if you've done a lot of birding throughout the early part of the year, you'll end up not necessarily needing a lot of the ducks that come through for your list for the year. You'll have a bunch of them already. Although there are some like wood duck, I rarely find a wood duck outside of the warmer months, but have before.
It's a fun spectacle to see either way. And then a couple that we haven't touched on are the mergansers. So hooded merganser, common and red-breasted.
Yep, and a lot of those are actually birds that move in big flocks. So we'll get tons and tons of red-breasted mergansers and common mergansers along the lake shore.
And well, I guess we haven't touched on these either. The scout. Well, we briefly mentioned the scoters, which I don't think they're really hanging out right now. They You can find them by us in winter, but then they move out. But also harlequin duck, which is still around on the lakefront, and then longtail duck, which we actually got to see today. A really nice male.
Yeah, one thing that I like about ducks, and we mentioned this as we were driving around, is that the males are pretty much easy to identify. There are some caveats. Sometimes you get some weird looking scaup where it's hard to differentiate between greater and lesser. But for the most part, when you see a male canvasback, a male, I mean, shoveler is easy, even if it's a female, redhead, ringneck duck, you know. There's not usually a lot of in between guessing. Females is a different story. You can get some really similar looking female ducks.
I feel like you don't normally see just the females. I feel like you either see just the males or males and females together. I feel like it's rare that I only see a female, which we did today actually. We had a redhead, but I think it had an injured wing because it was hanging a little down. But it did perk up, so it didn't seem too bothered by it. But that was one of the rare times when we only saw a female of a certain species.
Yeah, you'll sometimes get weird mixed flocks as well, where you'll have like different types of females and then one male. So there'll be like a male lesser scaup, and there'll be female lesser scaup and female ringneck ducks. So you can get some weird groupings, but by and large, they're easy to identify, which is nice as long as they're not super far out.
Yeah, and we were talking about some other rare species. One that has been in the state, but we haven't gotten gargany. I think we need another one of those to show up.
We certainly do. We tried for one this time of year a couple of springs ago, to no avail. We got there the same day it was reported. So it was reported, we got there, and there's tons of people out there, and it's the kind of thing where you show up, and the worst thing you hear is, well, no one's seen it for a while now. That's even worse than you just missed it by a few minutes, I think,
Unless they like it flew away and it's gone.
which happened once with the Barrow's Golden Eye legendary story about how one of us had to eat an extra bowl of cereal,
One of us.
which made us late. It wasn't me.
Gee, thanks. Yeah, that was one we learned the lesson of just go as soon as possible.
And it was one of those movie
Safely.
situations where it was one of our friends that we saw there, and we are like, "Where is it?" He's like, "Oh, that thing's 1,000 miles away by now. You
Yeah.
just missed it by two
Yeah, he's like,
minutes."
that thing's way gone. It was like the pink-footed goose in the big ear. He's like, that thing's halfway to Kansas by
Yeah,
now.
yeah. We're like, "Any chance it comes back?" He's like, "No,
No, yeah.
it's gone."
Yeah, it was a tough one. Um, what is some of your favorite species that you haven't seen yet, duck-wise, on the duck front?
Like species I haven't seen this
Yeah,
year.
do you even need anything? Do
I
you
don't
have
know.
all
I
of
haven't
them?
been keeping track of my state list.
Jeez.
It's so hard because we traveled to Florida, we'll travel to Texas, and it all kind of blends together. So I'm like, I know I saw that this year, but where in the world did I see it? I think for this year in the state, I still, nope, got wood duck with natty wags on a trip, so I don't need wood duck. Got widgeons. I wonder if the same cinnamon teal will be back at the same little marsh that we've been getting it the past
I
two
have no
years.
idea. Hopefully.
So I need some of the scoters still, but I'm gonna have to wait till November to get those.
Really? Which ones did you miss?
I don't remember. I haven't been hitting the birding in the state very hard this year.
Did we get well, me and Nathaniel saw some really nice Scout reviews out in North Carolina.
See, that's how it happens. You're like, oh, I got
Yeah.
scoters in
I was
North
like,
Carolina.
got surf scoter, got black scoter, because then you get really good views and you don't
Got
have
common
desire to
eider.
go out and look for stuff that's in your state then. It really is a killer when you see stuff out of state for your state year list to have the
Yeah,
drive to go see that stuff again. And that especially when it's a real inconvenience. Like, man, I need this bird for the year, but it's 5 hours away. And
yeah,
do I really want to spend the time and gas money just to check it off for the year?
yeah, that definitely happens. To anybody out there who's doing some kind of big year, never travel out of state for multiple reasons
If it's a
because
state big year, that was you're talking
yes,
about.
if it's a state big year, like if you're doing a state big year, let alone the fact that you need as much time in your state as possible to get birds that show up, because if you leave for a week, something really rare will show up. If you go someplace and see a bunch of birds there, you will not have as much desire to chase them. I always joke that traveling ruined my state list because stuff shows up here now, and I'm just like, that's fine. I don't need it. There was the sage thrasher that showed up. And I was like, I don't need it. California gull showed up. I don't need it. I don't even have that bird as a state bird, but it doesn't matter
What
because
have you
I've seen
seen
it.
California gull?
Out west.
We
We
got them
had
out
them in
there?
Oregon.
Okay.
We had them in Oregon. I've had them in Wyoming.
Okay.
I think they're the state bird of Utah. I
Is that true?
think so.
Is there a weird reason for that?
Yeah, there's some strange reason for it. I don't remember what it is.
Let's see.
Something similar to St. Patrick
It is the
driving all the
California
snakes
gull.
out of
Oh, this is
Ireland.
interesting. The top thing that comes up says Utah state bird is commemorated as the seagull. which a lot of birders be like, that's not an accurate term because it's just gull. And then it says more accurately, the California gull, known in Utah for having saved the pioneers from the Mormon cricket invasion of
Told you.
1848 and subsequent years, gulls hold a hallowed place in local history. Seagull is a generic term referring to gulls of all types. That is an interesting story.
Yeah. So there you have it. Save the Mormons from the crickets.
Yeah. It says when California gulls returned to breed, they started feasting on the katydids, saving the crops from complete destruction. A golden statue in Salt Lake City commemorates the event, and in recognition, the California gull was made the state bird of Utah. I think that's a great state bird, honestly.
It's kind of goofy though because it has a different state in its name.
Yeah,
It feels a
that's
little
true.
wrong.
You know what? Let's rename it the Utah gull. What do you
Okay.
think?
I'm in. Let's start a petition.
Um, why don't you tell us or tell everybody about the trip we took today?
I would love to. First of all, birding in March in Wisconsin is the worst because so
That's
many
not how I
days
thought you would
have
start
been
this.
cold and windy. It's not that the birds are bad. The birds are great. You just get spoiled with 1 or 2 days in early March when the weather's beautiful and you're like, this is great. It's all going to be good from here on out. And guess what's in the forecast for next week? Snow. So we went out today. We were searching for some red-throated loons, and red-throated. I'm getting excited now. I can't talk, but red-throated loons are a bird species that usually comes through the state in February and then March. So you have a little bit of time to get them. Some will linger around or show up at different times of the year. You get them back in fall as well, but that's really the best time I found. So we decided to go out and look for them because there was 11 reported in one place along the coast and like 16 reported in another place. So we wanted to go down to Racine and we hit the coastline. There's a harbor down there that was supposed to have a lot of these birds. So we walked out. It's super windy. So the waves are crashing over the edges of the rocks. It looks like one bad move and you might fall in the water and never get back. We had to climb kind of this break wall to get out there. I was a little worried about you, Derek, because I could see you were like 20 feet above the level I was standing at, carrying your large camera. And I could just picture looking and then you not being there and be like, well, we got to form a rescue operation.
Well, you could easily like break a leg if you fell into one of those rock chasms or got your leg stuck. So thankfully we didn't have to do that.
Well, yeah, you look down and there's a hole big enough for a human to fit through that goes down I don't know how long. And the only thing that's keeping you from going down there is the fact that you're on these boulders that sometimes are loose and shift
Yeah, the
under
worst thing
you.
was when you step on one and then it moves. You're like, I could do without that.
Yes. So we did end up seeing one red throated loon fly by. So got pictures and videos of that one. It did a little loop and then flew back out. And then we were looking into the sun and we saw the red throated loons, but they were kind of silhouettes. You didn't get really the close up views. But we did also have horned grebe. There was some really nice breeding plumage horned grebes there, lots of red-breasted mergansers. And then we decided to go to the other side of the marina. So there's break wall on one side and then kind of a long walkway along a break wall on the other side. And then inside the harbor from there, we actually found a male long-tailed duck that was reported. So long-tailed duck is a really beautiful bird. In my opinion, their winter plumage is actually much better than their breeding plumage. Breeding plumage, they're a lot darker in the face. They have more distinctive white patches in winter. So we got some looks at that. Derek was upset because it never came that close to shore, and I think he would
It
have just
was
sat
kind of
there for
just in the
hours
middle.
watching it.
Yeah, it was in a tough spot. That's having me wonder when we did America's Favorite Duck, how far did long-tailed duck make it? Because that is such a gorgeous bird.
I feel like it made it pretty far, at least to the Elite Eight, I think.
I'm gonna see if I can take a look.
But I believe it came up against wood duck, actually, if my memory
Did
serves
it?
me.
Is that what happened?
I mean, anything that came up against wood duck didn't fare so well.
Yeah. Let me see. I have some old submissions here from America's Favorite Duck, actually.
I went back and watched a bunch of them
Did
in
you?
preparation for the warbler one.
Nice. Um, oh, that's the final.
Definitely didn't make it to the final. For
So
anyone
our
listening,
final four was Wood Duck, versus Hooded Merganser, and then Pintail versus Harlequin Duck.
mhm. Yep.
Hooded merganser made it that far. Wow.
I think Pintail defeated King Eider too, which I was surprised about.
So our Elite Eight was Shoveler versus Hooded Merganser, Greenwing Teal versus Harlequin Duck, Surf Scoter versus Wood Duck, Northern Pintail versus King Eider. So dang, Longtail must not made it to the Elite Eight even
I think it came up against like Wood Duck, maybe
early.
in the round of 32 or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's kind of the
dang.
danger of doing them random.
Yeah, it's tough. But I mean, I guess it would have had to come up against it at some point. So
All that really matters is the winner, Derek.
yeah,
Although
there's
I
no
do
second
believe
place.
that the final of Wood Duck Harlequin Duck was the correct final in my opinion.
King Eider. I feel like those birds that are really cool, but they're not as common. It would just like it would feel weird if King Eider won because it's not, widely known by everybody. It felt like Wood Duck was a good choice because it's beautiful and it feels like practically anyone could go see one, you know?
And it's American.
Yes. But I don't know. It seemed like that kind of made sense. So,
I was fine with Wood Duck winning it. I think we saw the writing on the wall for that with how many people were voting for it early. But if I remember correctly, I think that Harlequin Duck actually gave it a pretty good run for its money, and it was fun to do. That was the first time we ever did one of these brackets. It was a ton of work, and then we didn't do one last year, but we decided to do the Warbler one this year because it would be fun, and it has been fun so far at least. Even though it's been a ton of work, it's been fun.
I feel like we've had such a bad March Madness tournament that we need
The
the
real life
Warblers to
March
come in.
Madness
There's no
tournament.
NIL in this, so it makes it more pure.
No one's paying the birds.
Right. Or us to do
Certainly
it.
not us.
But it is fun. And make sure you're going out and voting. Uh, Voting will end for this on Saturday.
Yep.
What's the date for that? The 29th?
Yes, 29th at midnight will end. So you will see this on Friday or listen to this on Friday, and then if you have not voted, you will have some time to do it.
Yeah. So I guess to recap, Snowy Owl, not a genetic mutation. Make sure to vote in America's favorite warbler and get excited about seeing some ducks. If you want to leave a comment, let us know what your favorite duck is as well. Even though we know what America's favorite is. But
Maybe you have a
individually,
different
let
one.
us know what your favorite one is. Anything else to add?
No, I think that's it. I'm probably going to end up going out with you to use those binoculars we just got to look at some ducks soon. So I think that'll be really fun. We'll go to the marsh and make a day of it.
Cool. Thanks to everyone for watching and listening to this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.